Truncation happens a lot of time in interface design because so much of the data that we design for is often user generated. And there could be anything from usernames to video titles to body text. Most of the time, if you're designing an interface that has some type of account, user account, they're signing up and they're doing things, there's gonna be user generated text. Think like tweets, names, video titles, podcast titles, just all of these things that our interfaces house are going to be user generated content. And that can be one word or it can be 40 words. So we have to figure out, where do we draw the line on truncating text, whether it's titles or body text. Let's take a look at a couple of examples, starting with the Apple Podcast app. I've got a number of podcasts here, and what I want to pay attention to here is the truncation of the title. So you can see on the very top, number 38, Stillness is the Key with Ryan Holiday. Now that title breaks into 2 lines and it doesn't need to be truncated. But if you look at the one below, it's a lot longer, Becoming a Niche Reviewer, Story Behind Backwards with Chase Ree, and then ... Now that one has 3 lines with truncated title. So the designers here are making a decision that it's got to be truncated at some point, and it's better to be after 3 lines than 4 lines, because if the thing extended past 4 lines, then the text to the right of the image would not even, it would kind of break the format of that little component. But what's really interesting though, if you go down, and I think there's one. So if you look at Crimes of Passion right here, Harold Noakes Part 1, that's a very short title, and there's no more content to break into 2 or even 3 lines. So what they do here is they're bringing in the description, 2 lines of the description, and then they're truncating the second line of the description. And that kind of makes up for the content that wasn't able to be filled with the title. And then if you look at this one for How I Built This, Evite Selena Tabakawala, that's a 2 line, and then they're only bringing in 1 line of the description with a truncated description. And all of them, kind of occupy that same amount of room. So there are these little rules here where, if it's a 3-line title, then we're going to truncate it and we're not going to bring in any description. Or if it's a 2-line title, then we're going to bring in 1 line of the description, then truncate the description. And that way you can see that every single one has a nice block of text related to the cover image. So there's 3 or 4 variations here just to get some consistency with each one of these episodes. And then if you go into one of the details here of a larger, say I open that up, in order to show the entire title, they're just having this big marquee kind of scrolling thing. And I don't know if that's, they don't really have a lot of other options here because they don't want to mess up with the controls. You want to be able to kind of play and pause this more than you want to be able to read the title. So they're kind of making some trade-offs there based on, the title length and then what's most important. Because once I'm in this view, I don't really care that much about the title. I care more about being able to control the podcast and things like that. So that's just one example looking at this Apple Podcast app. All right, now I want to show you 4 different personal projects of mine or client projects, and we'll take a look at some different ways where I had to truncate different titles, different things in the app. So let's look first at an app called Skyscanner. Okay, inside of this app, there's tons of screens all over, but I want to focus right on this guy here. This is an older file, so some of my icon fonts that I was using that I do not have on this machine are screwing up. So just ignore this. This was also pre-iPhone 11, so it's like a smaller screen. But what I really want to focus on here is this part down here. So, and just to set a quick stage for what you're looking at. This was an iOS app and a web app that allowed multiple people from the same company to all book their flights together. And then they could send their information to the manager, and they could see which of their other colleagues had booked certain flights. So you could all book a company-wide flight, and you could get on the same flight with other people. So it was a way for business travelers within the same organization to book their flights together. So in this case, say I'm looking for flights and I'm searching from Scotland to Singapore, and I can say, oh, okay, well, in this flight, Ross he's on that flight. He's already booked it. But what if other people in the company have also booked that flight? So one thing we're doing here is we're changing this component to just show that Ross has booked it. We're changing it to show 4 people here. So now we have Ross, some guy named ET, we have this guy, and MS. And so even though this isn't a complete truncation of text, it's just a way to show more information in a smaller kind of screen. So in this case, if we tap this drop down, which is kind of indicated here that this is going to expand, now we have this component here where Ross is fully expanded. Now we have that same version of the component here as a list item. And now we can see, oh, okay, that's Ross, Edward Taylor, Steve Skyman, and Matt D. Smith. And these are gray circles because they're pending, and these are green circles because they've booked. So maybe these people, have a slightly different status. But it's one kind of small and interesting way to truncate information in a smaller space. So we do have the title for the person's name, and there's no way we're going to fit more than one of these on a row. So rather than clutter up the entire search results with everything on there, we can kind of make use of clever truncation. And, we're also accounting for avatars that are missing. Maybe they haven't uploaded an avatar, but at least we can bring in their initials to kind of supplement that material so the user knows what they're looking at. And then if you look at some of the other ones, it's just not there because no one's booked this yet. Another kind of interesting way that we're truncating text here is that this particular flight from Scotland to Singapore, it's stopping in London, Heathrow, and I guess that's Turkey. I'm not sure. We'll call it Turkey. And then in Singapore. So these are airport codes, and we're trying to signify like the amount of layover time here. That was the width. And we also want to show like what airline is going to be showing on these particular search results. And a lot of this information I got from the team. It wasn't like I just knew, a lot of research went into this as well. So, but we knew that there are going to be multiple instances where the leg of a flight would be handled by another carrier. And so we're saying British Airways and 2 others. And we're showing that 2 others can be tapped on because it's a slightly different color. It's that call to action color. And so we know we're not going to say British Airways and Air Turkey and Air Singapore. So we're saying British Airways, which is the first logo shown. And then we have 2 others, which is the active text. So in a way, we're truncating those 3 airlines into one, plus a little bit of link, like a call to action that can expand that. And this is really commonly seen on Instagram or Facebook, where it says, or even Twitter, where it says, liked by your best friend and 3 others, or liked by Matt and 20 others, or it might say liked by Matt and Ross and Dan and 3 others, something like that. It's kind of an easy way to kind of condense a bunch of names, show a little bit of relevant information, but then also have a way to show even more information. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at My Monero, which is a desktop application that holds cryptocurrency in a digital wallet. So in this case, we're using Monero, which I had never heard of until this project. It's kind of like Bitcoin, but apparently more decentralized and whatnot. Anyway, let's take a look. Okay, so I'm just going to hide my toolbars here, and let's zoom in on this kind of wallet area. All right, so with all of these crazy long wallet addresses, they're super long. So if I scroll over here and I show you, like, this is an actual, the length of an actual wallet address. And there's just no way that we need to show all of this by default. It's just a lot of information, and no one would really ever read all of this. It's more going to be like copy and paste. So the way I'm handling that here is, so this screen is like your wallet. So like you can have multiple wallets. So if I go to spending cash wallet versus my savings wallet, click here, go into this big wallet, and I've got these color coded so you can choose different colors for your wallets. That's kind of nice. So whatever wallet you're in, it'll show like, that color for that specific wallet. A lot of times people just wanted to copy the wallet address so they could send money or receive money. So we're just giving them an easy way to copy that wallet address without having to look at the entire thing. So our active text here is blue. We're using blue as kind of like our active link color. But you can see we're truncating this at a very specific place. So if I went up to here, it would just be too much. But I wanted enough negative space in here to kind of give copy its own breathing room. We could have gone maybe slightly longer, right in there to make it even with the space on the left and the right of each one. But we're not really gaining that much information by having a little bit more. So I chose to kind of truncate it right there. That way you could click on copy. And then now if we expand this, just like on our Skyscanner, I'm adding like a little kind of drop down here. So if you click on that drop down, it's going to give you the full address, and it's going to give you the view key and the spin key. These are other things that I actually can't remember what they even do, but it was important to the project at the time based on my research and talking to the guys who were developing this. So just know that it was a lot of information that didn't really need to show up on the main wallet. I think this is another reason why I decided to go with that particular width on the truncated version up top, because I wanted it to kind of match. So if it was closer, it would just be a lot of information. And I knew a lot of these were going to be 2 or 3 lines. So these are 2 lines and these are 3 lines. And then you can see again on these, there's a transaction detail where it's also the same wallet address. But if I go into this section with the arrow here, that's going to take me to the transaction detail screen, which is right here. And then you got transaction ID. You got all these like longer information that is a part of those line items. But a lot of that stuff, just like in the podcast app, you can kind of suck in that information to a list view to show just a slightly more relevant version of that. So you can always kind of think about what are all of the ingredients that I'm working with on a search result for a plane trip or a flight. What are the ingredients that I'm working with in a cryptocurrency wallet, transaction. So you list all of your ingredients out and you can say, okay, I can take a part of that and put it here and then link it to show the full thing. You don't always have to just show everything all at once, because a lot of times it's not that relevant, and you want to have a scannable list. The same way on the podcast app, you want to have a scannable list that you can just go through quickly. You don't necessarily need to see the whole entire thing at all times. But it is helpful in the podcast example that you see a lot of the title and not just one line of it, because otherwise it would be hard to read. In the next example, I want to show the beta page for Shift Nudge, which you've probably already seen, but you might not remember. On this, I wanted to list all of these lessons out, but I didn't necessarily want to show them all at once. I just felt like that was a lot of information to parse when someone first landed on the page. So I wanted it to be a little bit intriguing, so you know that it's there and there's maybe a little bit more, but not kind of overwhelming. And so all I did here was I added a rectangle on top of this, and a gradient that went from 0% opacity to 100% opacity of the background color. And that way it just kind of faded it down. And then I just adjusted the height of that gradient based on what I thought looked pretty good. And so like you can see 1, 2, 3, and then 4 is kind of, you can barely see what the 4 is, which kind of, hopefully you can tell that there's more there. I did not add a read more or, a little plus button, which would have made it a lot more explicit, because I thought there's not much else going on the page. So if people are on this and they're curious enough, then they're going to tap or click this to see it. So that's another way, just kind of adding a gradient where it fades out. And then lastly, I want to look at this. This is like a red camera design I did as kind of a concept. And on the information page, you can see it's basically the same exact idea that I have this gradient here. Only on this one, I have more. So you can click this and then it would just expand into more information. And it works, whether it's dark or light. It's just another simple way to kind of show, that there's the ability to read more. So whether you're truncating titles, truncating Bitcoin addresses, or travelers, body copy, truncating text and kind of dealing with bits and pieces of the text is going to be a big part of how your interfaces come together. So I'll post links to a lot of these files down below that you can get into and check out. But for homework, I want you to take some screenshots of the Apple Podcast app. I can also provide those down below if you don't have access to it, or something like the YouTube sidebar. Like if you go to youtube.com, click on a video and you see the sidebar, some kind of app, and you might discover one on your own that you enjoy that has some version of like truncating text with titles and body copy, or, one or the other. But the Apple Podcast app will be great. And I want you to go through and try to really pixel by pixel recreate at least 3 to 5 of those components, if not the entire screen. And you'll get an idea for the line height and where the truncation takes place, how many characters it is, and just get a feel for truncating the text and maybe even playing with the way that one component can handle multiple versions of that. Or do you need 1 or 2 components? And again, you also don't need to use reusable components for this necessarily, but it would be a good way to kind of break into that and start discovering some ways to handle that information. So don't worry about posting this to Dribbble because you're just kind of copying this for practice, but definitely post it into Slack and let us take a look. Let's get some feedback and let's see how it goes.